What's up? It's Way Up with Angela Yee. I'm Angela Yee. And of course, it's time for Wealth Wednesday. And Stacey Tisdale, my partner, is here.
Woo woo! It is Wealth Wednesday, everybody. We are so excited about this week's episode.
And Jasmine Brand is here too.
Yes.
But we do have a special guest with us, Alan Sukholitsky. We said that right.
Sukholitsky.
Yes. And this is all about Masterworks. You're the Chief Investment Officer for Masterworks. So first, tell us what Masterworks is for everybody listening.
Yep. So first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Masterworks is a company that was started in 2017. And the goal of the company is to make art accessible and investable to the vast majority of investors. And the reason why this was so revolutionary when we started the company is because, if you think about the fact that paintings can often sell for millions and millions of dollars, if you stop for a moment to think who can actually afford to buy these things, you quickly realize, well, there are probably only a bunch of individuals and families around the world who have enough money to buy them.
Right.
So the idea was, is there a way for us to actually make multi-million-dollar paintings investable for the majority of investors? And the way that we do it is actually, it's funny, it's so simple to think about it and talk about it now, but before somebody thought of it, just like everything else, it's confusing until you figure it out. Basically, the way it works is, when investors buy stocks on the stock market, you're buying a piece of an otherwise very big company, right? If you want to invest in Apple, you don't need trillions of dollars to buy the entire company. Right. You can just buy a few shares of the company. And so the thinking for these paintings was exactly the same, which is, if we buy paintings that are millions of dollars in terms of their price, and we cut them, so to speak, cut them into pieces, or what's called fractionalize them, then we give investors the ability to buy pieces of multi-million-dollar paintings. So now they can invest in them and they can profit from the performance that the art market has had.
So our audience can think of it just like a Robin Hood or just like a stash, the micro investing, but you're bringing it to the art market.
That's exactly the way this works.
And real estate, we do that in real estate also.
When you explained it to me in real estate terms, I was like, oh, I get it.
Right. Yeah. And I saw one study said that all forms of art investment represent $60 billion worth of total transaction volume per year. Right. So they said a healthy portion of that comes from smaller investors who pool their money with others.
That's exactly the idea. I mean, one of the things, it's funny. I've thought about this a lot. For some reason, art, even though it's existed forever, right? Like you don't have to have a degree in art. If somebody asks you, even if you know almost nothing about art, is art a new invention, or do you think it's existed for a long time? Everybody knows
forever.
It's existed forever.
Hieroglyphics.
Exactly. It's actually funny you say that. I always make the joke that humans were drawing pictures on cave walls before they were investing in companies. So art has existed forever.
Right.
And yet, almost nobody has ever thought about investing in it. Almost nobody knows about what it is, how to think about it. And so they often assume that the art market might not actually even be that big. And yet, it's basically a $2.5 trillion asset class with $60 billion in volume every year.
I've definitely bought some art. Jasmine, you've been to my house to see.
My favorite is a Prince one you have.
Oh, I did. And sometimes it's hard to tell because somebody told me one time also, like, as I know this is a different topic, but as I'm buying art, right, they're like, I'm always like thinking, is this something that's a valuable investment? But my friend was like, if you just like it and you're not going to sell it, then it doesn't really matter. You buy what you like if you're planning to just keep it in your home.
Right.
But who knows, one day it could be worth something. Mine was a Mr. Brainwash that I actually commissioned him to do. So I have that one. And then most recently I bought a couple of Nelson Macamo pieces when he did his art show in LA. So those are just like individual things, but it's not like I'm buying it to sell it, but the idea of buying into something that could be valuable and worth more money, like you can get a Basquiat, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Or not get a whole Basquiat,
Right.
but you
You
can
can
invest.
get a fraction of one.
Most of us cannot get a whole Basquiat.
And that's the thing about art. I always thought that people that bought art were like privileged. I always felt like it was a rich people's thing.
Like people used to think of the stock market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which I still kind of partially think that way, but your concept of what you all do,
You can invest.
You can invest, and it makes it more realistic for people.
So you don't have to get a Scarface poster and frame it in your
Exactly.
It's interesting.
If I feel that it's attainable for me, if I like doing it, I can invest in art as opposed to buying the entire piece, which I can't afford.
And it also doesn't have to be something that you necessarily like.
Right.
Well, this is
Exactly.
for investing purposes.
Yeah, it's for
It was
investing
Right.
purposes.
Really, when I started working for the Wall Street Journal, they said I was going to have to cover the art market,
Yep.
which I had to make the leap. The art market is really like a leading indicator of what's going on in the overall economy. So pay attention to what's going on in the art market. It's a phenomenal barometer of the overall economy. But for people out there who are thinking of, art that's for privileged people, just from an investment standpoint, the U.S. stock market is the best investment game in town, as we talk about. Since its beginning, it's averaged a 9% annual return. The art market, however, averages an average 12.5% annual return. So we really want people to start thinking about it as investing.
So you tell me to pull out all my stocks and then just invest?
No,
in art?
diversify. I'm
No,
telling you to
you-
put a
thank
little. We're
you.
going to
I know,
borrow.
it was a joke.
We're going to borrow against Angela's painting.
Yes. We're gonna take the equity out of that.
Yeah,
and then-
yeah.
Now, so tell us how this actually works,
Yeah.
right?
So basically, here's how the process works. So we buy a painting, an entirety. We Masterworks, we buy a painting. We create a company. We literally just create a company out of nowhere, an LLC. We create a company. We transfer ownership of the painting from us into that company that
This
we
is like
just
real
created.
estate. Okay.
And then we register that company with the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, regulatory body, and then we take that company public. So investors are technically, they're buying shares in that company.
Which
but
is a
remember,
painting.
that company is it just owns a painting. So basically the company is the painting. So when investors buy shares in that company, they buy shares in the painting. That's as simple as the process is. But once again, like I said before, until somebody thought of how to do that, it was,
Right.
So
Out
you
out
the
of
first
reach.
kind of company to think
Yeah.
of this, or wow,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, first ones to do it.
And I you broke down how it came about, but was it a personal experience? Like, damn, I really want this. How would I be able to attain it? Or
Who's this, Scott?
So our founder, Scott Lynn, he's been involved in the art market for a very long time. And he had the idea for the company because it's a little bit of a funny story because, when there are some things that people naturally think about in number terms, and there are some things that people just never think about in number terms. So the way the idea came was he was having a conversation with some of his friends who are art collectors. And he asked them, if he asked them this question that I'm about to tell you, if he asked them this question for stocks or for real estate or for anything else, they would have had an answer for him. But he asked them this question for art, and they looked at him like he had 10 heads. And the question was as simple as, how is your art portfolio doing? Simple question. And they looked at him like, what do you mean, how's my art portfolio? My paintings hang on my walls. They look beautiful. I don't even understand what you're asking me. So what he realized is art has never been thought of in sort of number and financial terms. So what Masterworks did for the first 2 years of its existence, we basically compiled this huge database of all of basically anything quantitatively oriented in the art market. We compiled this database with 70 years worth of data in it. Started analyzing it. That's how we figured out, wait a minute, some segments of the art market, as you pointed out, go up over time at 12.6%. Some segments of the art market don't go up quite as much. Some artists are way more attractive to invest in than other artists. There was a lot of this analytical work that we did to figure out where should we invest, where should we not invest. So that's kind of how the whole thing started.
And with anything else, there's also the risk that it could also potentially go down in value, right?
always a
Just like
risk.
in the stock market and in real estate also.
Yep. The only thing I would say on that point is that, so the risk you're talking about is something in the investment world that's called loss rates, which is basically how often does this thing that you're looking at go down. Loss rates in the art market are actually significantly lower than they are for just about every other asset class. So I want to be clear, investments in the art market can go down.
Right.
Yeah, it's always a risk.
Right. Always a risk. It doesn't matter what investment you're looking at, it is always a risk. But loss rates in the art market do happen to be a lot smaller than they are in other markets.
Like if somebody come and throw paint all over
my gosh.
or put gum on your
We can make something later. So people are going to listen to this and say, okay, that sounds great. How do I actually do it?
Yep.
And you're going to explain that. But one thing that I love is when someone says, okay, I want to start investing through Masterworks, they actually get a free consultation with a financial advisor about their overall finances.
Yep. So
Oh, okay.
that is actually absolutely critical because just like an investor, if you're starting out investing in stocks, you'll often have a conversation with a financial advisor who will talk to you about what are your goals, what is the size of your portfolio, How much appetite do you have for risk? Is it a lot? Is it a little? They'll kind of put together all these different pieces and they'll figure out what's the kind of portfolio that person should build for the client. How much should they have in stocks and all the other things. Our financial advisors are basically doing the exact same thing. The only difference is they are focused on the art investments in a client's portfolio. So they'll talk about what are your goals, what kind of a time horizon do you have, all of those questions, they're all the same. And the part that I want to emphasize is that every one of our investors actually has to talk to one of our financial advisors before they make any investments with us at all. Now, if you think this through, it's not like we always had to do it that way, right? You can imagine that, you know, in an ideal world, you would love for anyone to be able to sign up and to go and make all the investments they want, and that would be great and wonderful. The problem is we are, at the end of the day, a financial institution. We have a duty to our investors to make sure that they're not taking risks that they should not be taking. And the way that we do that is we make sure that every single investor, and we have a lot of investors at this point, every single one of them has to talk to a financial advisor first to understand what is the appropriate amount they should invest in their portfolio before they make any investments.
What
Well,
do
that's
those numbers look like? Like if someone needs thousands, does it typically come out to be a thousands of dollars recommendation?
So a lot of it will depend on the specific investor. In fact, most of it depends on the investor. I wouldn't give you a strict minimum that we have, and the reason why is because it varies considerably. So we have investors who literally span the gamut. So we have investors who have very little experience investing, who are just starting to build their investment portfolio, and their portfolio will be very little. We have investors who are billionaires all the way at the opposite end of the spectrum, and they have enormous portfolios and everything in between. So what I would say is, depending on the type of investor that this person might be, we will make appropriate recommendations for their portfolio. And so as an example, the same way that you would never tell an investor that their entire portfolio should be in real estate, you should also never tell an investor that their whole portfolio should be in art, or frankly anything else for that matter, because that's not diversification, which you guys actually mentioned a few minutes ago.
People can get in the door for a couple $100s. Depending on the investor.
It all depends on the investor. So I think the main takeaway here is we will never, ever want to make an outsized recommendation for any particular investor. If your whole portfolio is $50,000, let's say, we are not going to tell you to put $25,000 into art investments, because that is horrible from a risk management perspective. So it's always going to be relevant for the investor that we talk to.
And then you can actually buy shares for it's like $20.
Every share is $20. So obviously paintings that are worth more will have many more shares than paintings that are worth less, but the shares are always $20 per share.
And I can sell them. Just like I would a regular.
So you actually have the ability to, it's funny you brought that up. We have something called a secondary market. Secondary market is a fancy way of saying this is a place where investors who already own shares in paintings that we have, they can buy and sell those shares to each other.
Okay.
Now, I want to be really clear about something so nobody gets the wrong idea. Our secondary market, because it's a secondary market for art investments, it doesn't operate as sort of efficiently, and it's not as liquid as the stock market, right? If you buy a stock on the stock market right in this moment and you wanted to sell it 3 seconds later, you could do that. There's no problem. Stocks trade all day long. There are millions of people all over the world trading them. Art is not something that really trades on a very regular basis.
You're not a day trader.
You absolutely are not a day trader.
Day trader?
Yep. So you can sell shares to and from other art investors on our secondary market, but do not think of it as like the stock market. Okay. That's the best way.
And it's also, this is more of a long-term investment. You're
Thank
thinking
you.
more like
I was
a 3
bring
to
that
10
up.
year
Yes.
window.
Yep.
But if you should need to get your money out, you know, quickly. But that's also why you're diverse, right?
Yep.
This is something that you look at as a long-term investment.
Exactly.
And if there's things that you need to accomplish financially in the shorter term, this probably isn't
This is
the ideal way to do
for
it.
your long-term portfolio.
Or allocate less to it, right? It's one of those.
So, since 2017, you guys, I read, and I don't know if this is an updated number, 800,000 users?
Yep.
Okay.
I think it's a little more than that now, but yes.
Okay.
Wow.
And to date, I want to know what has been the most, I guess, I don't know how to say it, like successful or biggest return as which piece of art?
Yeah, which pieces are popping?
So I mean, the answer to your question was a very, very unique circumstance. So I want everyone who's listening to understand, do not expect this to happen every time. This was extremely unusual. We bought a painting by an African-American artist named sculpture, excuse me. And we ended up selling it approximately 2 months later. I'm not going to go into the details of the circumstances, but we sold it 2 months later, which was super fast as far as transactions go in the art market. That never happens, but we ended up selling it 2 months later. And so on an annualized return basis, that came out to 325%.
Wow.
That was the best performer. But again, I want to, so the main takeaway.
And that's like the stock market. That's an unusual thing.
Yeah.
That's
It's
not
extremely
something that
unusual.
happens all the time.
Playing
that's
the
that's
lottery.
off the charts.
Yeah.
That's way off the charts.
Okay.
So that is the answer to your question. That's been the best performer, but don't expect that to happen every single time.
Now, what happens when something gets sold? Do people get their money out? Like,
That's it.
Okay, so you
It's as
just
simple as
cash
that.
out.
Simple as that. Investors get their distributions. Yep.
Okay.
You mentioned the black sculptor you were mentioning. This
Yeah.
is also a way for people who want to get involved in art and want to learn more about art. They can support black artists and look for black artists. Tell us a little bit about that aspect.
Yeah, so, one of the most interesting things in the art market, and I'm still not even convinced that it's fully appreciated by the art world in general. I think it's coming around to it over time, but I still don't think it's fully appreciated. Remember before I was talking about all of this data that we used, we kind of built that big database with all those transactions in it and all that. So one of the things that we learned from analyzing that data is that the best performing investments in the art market are hands down by diverse artists. Now, that is actually one of the most ironic things in the world, because the art market overall itself,
The people buying.
there aren't that many diverse artists
Right.
to begin with.
Yeah.
So the fact that there aren't even that many diverse artists, and those diverse artists happen to be the ones that are actually generating the most attractive performance for people, that's extraordinary. So it's one of these interesting things where, we've brought down the barriers in the art market, allowing so many more investors to now be able to invest in the art market. That's one piece. The second piece is, if you're the type of investor who maybe wants to support certain artists in particular, you absolutely have the ability to do that with our platform, because remember before I said that the art market overall doesn't have that many diverse artists in it. Our platform actually has a disproportionately larger number of diverse artists. And if you're wondering, well, why might that be the case? I just mentioned it a minute ago, which is they often have the best performance. So how could we not offer them to investors?
Why do you think that is? And also tell our audience a little bit about some of the artists that you have up there.
Yeah, so I think over the last, 5, 10, 20 years, I think there's sort of been a resurgence in the appreciation of the African American community. I mean, I don't think I need to sort of talk on the show here about that. And I think that influences a lot of how well these artists are ultimately performing. One example would be Simone Leigh I already talked about before, because you asked what's been the best performer. Another example would be Sam Gilliam. Sam Gilliam is an artist who he passed away last year. He had a very long career, grew up in Kentucky, and a lot of his works included themes about sort of the African-American experience in the 60s and the 70s. He also had a thing for jazz musicians. And so that was an artist whose work we sold, and we generated, I think, just over a 33% return to our investors. So, it's just one of these things where it's funny how we straddle the art market, because on the one hand, we're involved in art, which is not always thought of as the most sort of financial oriented thing to do, but we're also having to pick really good investments for our investors. And so as a result of that, we're both educating investors on who are all of these different artists, what are the themes that they're bringing out in their work, and as a really nice supplement to that education, we're also generating very attractive performance for our investors.
So is there a buyer? Like, are there buyers who are actually choosing which pieces to acquire?
And how's the criteria for that too?
Yep. So we have an acquisitions team. Our acquisitions team has extensive experience in the art market. They spent their careers in galleries, auction houses, dealers, basically every area of the art market you could imagine. So they have an extensive network of art contacts globally, which actually gives us a big advantage, because a lot of people assume that all of the transactions that happen in the art market, that happen at auction. And the reason why people assume that very often is because auctions are the things that you read and hear about.
Yeah, they're like, this auctioned off for
Right.
X amount of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, most of the transactions in the art market don't actually happen at auction. They happen privately. And if you're wondering, well, how come you don't hear about them? Because they happen
Yeah, they're
privately.
private.
Of course you don't hear about them. So,
It's a whole different world.
so we have the benefit, because of our extensive network, of working with a lot of collectors directly, and it allows us the ability to bypass the auction houses. So the acquisitions team buys the paintings. We have a dispositions team. That's a fancy way of saying they sell the paintings, and the two teams basically work together to generate this performance.
Now, here's a personal question. What's your art collection like?
I can't talk about it.
Oh yeah, because it would be kind of like
It
I
is.
can't.
conflict. Kind
Not
of
like who
Conflict
is
of
it, but
interest.
like,
It'd be like
do you collect?
insider.
Or,
I do like art, but here's what I will tell you: the art that I like does not do very well from an investment perspective.
Okay, so you have the Scarface poster framed in the house. Okay.
Got it.
I'm the guy with that poster with the pins in the corner. Yep,
Exactly.
that's it. That's me.
Do you buy based on what you like?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
That's different.
Not based on what's going to bring the biggest
That's
return.
exactly right.
Okay.
So again, what Masterworks does, we're focused on good investment opportunities.
Okay.
Nobody says, "Oh, we should buy that piece because it looks really nice." That
Yeah,
concept doesn't
Because
exist.
it's hard for me to determine. I know people who really collect art, and they'll know about like the up and coming artists who the value is gonna. But I have no idea how you're supposed to be able to tell that. But I'm sure that you guys have people that can say, okay, we're gonna invest in this. This artist is about to blow up and be really big, and so
We use a lot of data to make our investment decisions.
Right.
And I know every time I say that, I know people are always going to scratch their head and wonder, you're talking about art. These are things that go on the wall in a museum. What do you mean data? But the reason nobody's ever used data to invest in the art market is because nobody ever had the data to do it, right? If you don't have the data, why would you even use it? You don't have it. Right. With us, we put together all of that data and we kind of analyze it. Honestly, the same way that a lot of professional investors analyze data to pick which stocks they want to invest in, it's not that different from what we're doing. The only difference is we're not talking about stocks. We're talking about paintings.
it's not a sexy emotion. It's
Yep. Yep. We are very
It's data.
objective.
I think the cool thing about art right now, and it's probably always been like this, I feel like it's becoming a bigger part of pop culture where we talk about it and we're interested in. I feel like more people are starting to be interested in buying and collecting and learning about this world.
Yes.
One thing they'll really like about Masterworks is I haven't done my appointment yet. I signed up, but I haven't gone through the time for the appointment yet. The newsletter is awesome. I'm like learning so much. They send this like daily or weekly newsletter that teaches you what paintings are hot. And
Yeah.
There's a very big educational component to what we do.
And it's fascinating.
And I honestly, I think we have a responsibility to provide that education too, because, you can imagine, what do you think would be easier for us to do? To just tell people art is a great investment, you should invest in it? Or to actually provide them with an education about all the things they're investing in?
Right.
Obviously, it's easier for us not to even bother with the education piece. But that's extraordinarily irresponsible because of what it is that we're talking about, right? Art has been this thing that humans have been involved in for centuries in so many different ways, right? It's a way for us to express ourselves. Certain artists, they kind of portray certain themes that are important to them. There's a lot to art that's not even just investment oriented. So we view it as a huge responsibility for us, not only to provide, yes, attractive returns for our investors, because that's ultimately why they're investing, but to provide them with an education so that they understand what it is that they're investing in the first place.
Well, Ellen, I got to ask you about NFTs then.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that Masterworks has also offered up for people to invest in? And what are your thoughts on that?
So I can tell you.
Do you have any?
No.
Your reaction was
You
not.
guys got to stop asking about his personal
Sorry.
stuff.
No, it's okay. No,
Sorry. It's kind of what we do.
It's fine. It's fine. I'll take anything. The thing about NFTs, so I'll tell you that before the NFT market collapsed, around the time that crypto did, before that, when we would get questions about NFTs and we would say, in a lot of ways, it's always going to be really hard, if not impossible, for us to make NFTs available as an investment because they're completely the opposite of what we're actually doing, right? If you just think about this for a second. So any painting that we're making available, every one of those paintings is unique. It is the only one of its kind in existence, right? Which automatically means it's very attractive as an investment because supply is ultimately capped.
Right.
It's the only one of its kind.
It's original.
It's original. It's the only one. it's got a lot of history, a lot of appreciation behind it. It's well known, so on and so forth. That's a painting. You talk about NFTs, and because they're very digitally oriented things, it's hard to have the same sort of supply dynamic that you have in the art market. You can't really have that with NFTs, right? Because ultimately anything that's digital, there can be infinite amount of it. So the reason I brought up what happened before the NFT market collapsed is because when we talked about our skepticism about NFTs from an investment perspective before the market collapsed, a lot of people actually thought we were crazy. We were often accused of being dinosaurs. Dinosaurs, of course, meaning like, oh, you guys are so old school because you're buying paintings that you can touch and put on your wall. That is so old. But then ultimately the NFT market collapsed.
Right.
And a lot of NFT and crypto investors ended up eventually coming to us to invest in the paintings after that. And what we realized is it sort of helped the case that we were making for a long time, that we weren't really sure what would make an NFT a really good investment. And then finally, when it panned out for us, they didn't call us dinosaurs anymore.
Right. No Bored Ape NFTs in the Masterworks.
That's it.
All right. Well, listen, we do really appreciate you for coming. This is so interesting to me as a person who does. I really am always trying to learn more about art, and I have been doing my own thing. So I feel like this could be something that's really fun for me too to learn about.
Thank you.
We're going to have you back and tell us, how can people find you?
I love it. We're if you go to masterworks.com, you can schedule an appointment, you can create an account. The whole process is actually very seamless.
Okay, I might do this.
Masterworks.
We were at Hill Harper's house and in Detroit, and he has a lot of amazing pieces of art there. He has a Michelin top. That one is
some amazing art.
Yeah, he really does. And so it was fascinating to me. He wants to make his mansion in Detroit into like a museum.
He should.
And he has so much art already. So he's been like doing his collecting and everything. But something like this, I think a lot of people would be interested in. And even just getting a newsletter first so you can feel more comkomfortable.
You can tell him that you own your pieces of Picasso.
There you go.
Pieces of Banksy.
You're like, oh yeah, I have a Banksy.
Yeah.
Masterwork fractional share, but that's okay.
All right. Well, Alan Sukholitsky, thank you so much for joining us.
It was a
Thank
great
you, guys.
conversation.
Masterworks. It's Wealth Wednesday.